The day I testified, my father stared at the floor while I told the world he was a child predator. I was 8 when I found the binder with my name on it, but no one listened. 15 years later, the courtroom did. The day I testified was the day my family name became courtroom evidence. I remember standing outside the courthouse in a jacket 2 sizes too big, one I hadn't worn since college, with sleeves that swallowed my fingers. It smelled like old books and bad decisions. I chose it on purpose. I didn't want to look polished. I wanted to look real. Inside, the air was cold, too clean, too sterile. Like the whole building was trying to scrub itself of the stories it held. My name was called. And suddenly, all the walls closed in. I walked to the stand on autopilot, every step thudding through my chest. The prosecutor smiled at me softly, encouraging. The judge asked if I would swear to tell the truth. I didn't hesitate. I've been waiting my whole life to tell the truth, I said, and then I began. I told them about the game of hide and seek, about the door at the end of the hallway, the cold air, the mildew, the black book with my name on it. I described the way my stomach turned when I saw photos of myself as a child. Sleeping, changing, playing outside, captured like prey through a camera lens I never knew was watching. I told them how my parents didn't believe me, how they told me to forget, how I tried, for years, to pretend none of it was real, until I couldn't anymore. I told them about the day the news broke, about the photo of the little girl who looked just like me, about the prosecutor's call, about returning to that same house, walking into my father's study, and finding a binder that didn't belong. I spoke slowly, carefully, every word weighed with years of silence. I said his name, my father's, and felt the courtroom stiffen. I told them what I heard on the wire. How he admitted being taught by my uncle, how he tried to rationalize it as survival, how he told me he thought he was protecting me. I told them about the second cabin, the children, the records, the dead, and when I was done, I said, I'm not here today because I'm brave. I'm here because silence was killing me, and because I'm not the only one they hurt. There were no dry eyes in the courtroom, not even mine. When I stepped down, I avoided both my parents' gaze. My father sat slumped at the defense table, expression unreadable. My mother, behind him in the gallery, looked pale and broken. She had aged 10 years in the last 2 months. I didn't care, because after everything, after all the lies, the cover-ups, the sacrifices made in the name of family, the only thing I could think was, if the truth destroyed this family, then maybe it was a family that deserved to burn. It didn't end after the testimony all. I wish I could tell you that speaking my truth fixed everything, that the monster went to prison, that justice arrived like a sunrise. But that's not how these stories work. The truth doesn't bring peace. It brings fire. After my court appearance, I became something I never intended, the girl who broke the family. The news spread fast, not just across town, but through every branch of the family tree. Second cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were calling my mother, calling my aunt, saying things like, she could have handled it privately, or that poor man was just a victim of his older brother, or the worst one. Why drag the whole family down just to make a point? Make a point. Children died. I didn't care if the family was uncomfortable. The silence they wanted me to protect was a graveyard. Uncle Mark had finally broken, not out of guilt. No, that would have been too human for him. But because his own son, Jake, had testified, that part hit like an earthquake. I hadn't seen Jake in years. He was the quiet cousin, the shy one, the kid who once gave me his last fruit roll-up without saying a word. We reconnected only because he reached out after the story broke. He asked to meet in private. When I saw him, he looked like someone who had been walking through hell barefoot, hollow-eyed, and jumpy, chain-smoking, despite never touching a cigarette when we were kids. And then he said it. I found that room first, a year before you did. The floor dropped under me. Jake told me how he found the secret door, how his dad, the man who everyone called kind, generous, the one who always made balloon animals at birthday parties, had caught him in that room and made sure he'd never tell. Not through threats, through shame, through manipulation, through grooming. Jake had been a victim. Maybe the first, maybe not. But like me, he'd carried it, alone, for years. We talked until the cafe closed. Then we sat in my car in silence for almost an hour. 2 cousins bound by blood and bruised by it. And somewhere between the silence, Jake said something that still echoes in my head. It wasn't just a secret room, it was a shrine to sickness, and our family left it there to grow. He was right, and it didn't stop with my uncle or my dad. There were signs that others had known. A few teachers from our childhood came forward to say they suspected something was wrong. Some neighbors even admitted they'd seen strange men around my uncle's property late at night. But they didn't want to cause trouble. Didn't want to cause trouble. That phrase followed me like a ghost. As if protecting children was trouble. As if exposing evil was worse than the evil itself. By then, the prosecutor had decided to charge both my uncle and my father to the fullest extent of the law. There would be no plea deals, not after the discovery of a second cabin, not after Jake's testimony, not after my wiretap, my journal, the photos, the binders, not after the bodies. What we were dealing with wasn't one man's depravity. It was a pattern, a system of silence. And yet, some relatives still said I should have kept quiet, that I should have let my father go out with dignity, that I should have protected what was left of the family. But what kind of family hides predators in their living rooms? What kind of mother hears her daughter say she saw photos of herself being watched in secret and tells her to shut up? I'll tell you, a family that isn't worth saving. After the last hearing, the press quieted down, but the damage inside me kept growing louder. There's something no one warns you about when you speak up. Especially when it's against your own family. The pain doesn't come all at once. It doesn't hit like a thunderclap. It seeps, slowly, like a poison you didn't realize you swallowed, until it's already taken root. I couldn't walk into a grocery store without wondering if the woman behind me in line was someone who thought I was a liar. I couldn't sit in a waiting room without imagining the whispers. That's her, the one who turned on her dad. I had to change apartments twice after neighbors recognized me from the local news coverage. But none of that compared to what happened the day I opened the mailbox and found a letter from prison. It was from my father. I stood there, on the sidewalk, frozen. The envelope wasn't marked official. He must have mailed it through someone else on the inside. My hands shook as I held it, torn between disgust and something darker curiosity. I should have burned it, but I didn't. I sat on my couch and opened it like someone defusing a bomb. The letter was 5 pages long, front and back. His handwriting was messier than I remembered, more frantic. It didn't start with an apology. It didn't even start with dear, It started like this. There are things you still don't know. What followed was a twisted confession. Not of crimes, but of justifications, excuses, history. He wrote about his childhood like it was a cage, about being initiated by Uncle Mark at age 7, about how he didn't know better and how no one ever taught him right from wrong. He used words like lost and broken and shame, but never once did he use the word sorry. He said what happened to me was unintended. He said he thought he had it under control, as if trauma is a faucet you can tighten, as if letting a predator into our home could ever be anything but a choice. He wrote about the network, claimed Mark had friends everywhere. Teachers, clergy, even a retired judge. He said the second cabin wasn't the end. There were more sites, more tapes, more victims. My vision blurred reading that part, because for the first time, I felt the scope of it. Like we hadn't just pulled a thread, we'd found a web. And if even half of what he said was true, we weren't dealing with just family secrets anymore. We were dealing with a ring of predators that had used children like pawns in some invisible game. I sent the letter to the prosecutor's office the next day. I didn't reply. I never would. But it haunted me. Not just what he wrote, but what it meant. That he still believed he could be heard. That he thought his pain still mattered. That he wore the mask of a victim while leaving an entire trail of them behind. That's what evil does best. It cloaks itself in pity. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he got caught. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about the boy he once was. The one Mark hurt first. The one who never got help. That boy died a long time ago. The man who took his place made his own choices. And I will never forgive those. But it made me wonder how many more were out there. Kids who were hurt and turned into monsters themselves because no one intervened. I had already given my statement. I had already testified. But I realized I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a systemic failure. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. I thought going public would be a quiet thing, a statement, a closed-door interview. A few lines in a newspaper article no one would finish reading. But that's not how it happened. The morning after, I handed over my father's letter. Jacqueline called. The DA's office wants to hold a press conference. She said, "We think it's time the public hears it." "From you." I hesitated. "You mean, speak." She was gentle, but firm. "You don't have to answer questions. You just have to tell the truth. We've already corroborated everything, but your voice makes it real. It matters." My stomach twisted, my throat closed. It wasn't about justice anymore. This was about accountability. Not just for the men who hurt me, but for the people who let them. Schools, law enforcement, neighbors, relatives, all the adults who saw something wrong and said nothing, so I agreed. The press conference was held in a county auditorium with wood-paneled walls and too many cameras. I wore black. I didn't plan what I'd say. I couldn't. I'd practiced words in the mirror, but they always came out stiff, like reading someone else's story. When the moment came, I stepped up to the podium, took one breath, and spoke like I was still in that closet, 8 years old, holding a book with my name on the spine. My name is not important. What matters is that I was 8 years old when I found a room full of secrets that no child should ever see. I told the truth, and the people I trusted most told me to forget it. I told them about the black binder, about the photos, about how my own parents called it a dream. I told them about the letter, the cabins, the map of monsters that stretched across counties, and I ended with this. You want to know how this could happen? How so many children could be hurt and no one stopped it? It happened because silence protects predators. It happened because comfort is more important than truth. It happened because no one wanted to believe their neighbor, their brother, their friend could be a monster. But monsters don't live under the bed. They sit at the dinner table. They drive carpool. They tuck you in at night. When I finished, the room was so quiet you could hear a phone vibrate in someone's purse. Then, clicks, flashbulbs, applause, and behind it all, a quiet sob I later learned came from a woman who recognized her own daughter's name from one of the journals found at the second cabin. That woman hugged me after. She didn't say thank you. She said, "Now, I believe, my daughter." The press conference went viral. News outlets picked it up nationwide. The case was no longer local. People started coming forward. Quietly, then louder. A former teacher, a church volunteer, a woman whose father had once vacationed near the cabin. The DA's office opened a broader investigation. Not just into Mark and my dad, but into every name, every location, every detail mentioned in those journals. It was horrifying, but it was working. The silence was breaking. And then, Jake called. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished tile. Clean, but sterile, like it was trying to mask the rot of the stories it held. I sat alone on the bench outside Courtroom 3B, my hands clenched in my lap, staring at the pale blue veins under my skin. It had been days since Jake gave his official statement. Not just a confession about what he saw, but a reckoning. And though I'd known for weeks what had happened, hearing my cousin's voice tremble as he confirmed it all to the prosecutors still haunted me. He didn't need to repeat what he'd already told me, that he'd discovered the hidden room before I did, that he'd been threatened into silence. That he, too, had been a child carrying a secret so heavy it warped his bones as he grew. I'd heard enough, but now other people had heard him too. And that changed everything. After his statement, 2 more family members came forward. Cousins I hadn't seen since childhood cookouts, who had buried their discomfort beneath decades of silence. One remembered Uncle Mark rubbing her shoulders during story time when she was 6. Another remembered being told to keep a special secret about a photo he took of her in a swimsuit at the lake house. All those strange memories that had been dismissed or gaslit away suddenly became evidence. Proof that none of us were ever crazy. The DA was done playing games. They rejected Uncle Mark's offer of a plea deal. No leniency, no reduced sentence, not even for his so-called information about a wider network. Maybe he thought he was untouchable. Maybe he thought throwing others under the bus would save him. But the prosecution had enough now. The binders, the photos, the second cabin, my dad's confession, and now Jake's testimony to tie it all together. And still, it didn't feel like a win. Not really. Inside me, something had cracked open. Not the shattering kind that screams for attention, the quieter kind, the slow crumble of a foundation you didn't realize was faulty until the floor starts to tilt. That morning, I'd opened my closet and stared at rows of clothes that suddenly felt like costumes. I didn't know who I was dressing for anymore. A survivor, a daughter, a witness. A legacy of crimes I had no part in, but couldn't escape. I chose black slacks and a navy blouse, neutral, controlled, armor. When I walked into the courtroom, Jake was already there, sitting beside Aunt Diane. Her face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes red-rimmed. Jake turned to meet my gaze and gave a single nod. Small, steady, like he was offering a hand without moving from his seat. I nodded back, no words, just Solidarity. The room filled quickly. Lawyers, reporters, other victims' families, and somewhere in the back, my mother. I saw her as I walked past. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, but she didn't try to speak to me, just watched, lips pressed tight, face drawn with shame or grief or both. I didn't care to guess. They brought out my uncle first. His eyes darted across the room, as if searching for someone still on his side. He didn't find them. Then came my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the guilt had finally started weighing down his spine. He kept his eyes on the floor until he sat down. Didn't even glance at me. Good. I didn't come for reconciliation. I came for truth, as the prosecutor presented the charges again. Now expanded thanks to Jake's testimony and the discovery at the second cabin. I felt a strange stillness inside me. The kind that happens just before a wave hits. You see it. You know it's coming. But you don't move. You don't breathe. You just brace. When the judge asked if I was ready to testify at trial, I said yes. The word came out steady, even as my throat tightened. I don't know what it'll be like to sit in front of a courtroom full of strangers and talk about the most violated parts of my past, but I do know this: I won't let silence win again. This time, the story will be told on my terms, and it will not be buried.